Rising star Labour MP Jake Richards of the Rother Valley and former Business Secretary?
Levelling up Secretary.
Levelling up Secretary.
And Chief Secretary.
And Chief Secretary. Sir.
For today.
Still a rising star.
Still a rising star. Sir, and the Knight of the Realm, Sir Simon Clarke, now boss of the think tank Onwards. Jake, I know you have to be loyal, but I mean, did you come into politics to slash the size of the state, to take away welfare payments from some of the neediest people in this country, and pretend and sitting there clapping that 1% growth is acceptable?
Well, you don't get to decide when you come into politics, and this government has inherited a complete mess from the last government. But not only just from the last government, the global economic picture is bleak across the globe, and they've had to make really difficult decisions today. But actually, if you look at what the Chancellor has announced today, there is not just green shoots, but actually reason for optimism.
Are there green shoots though? I mean,
growth uprated, inflation down,
to
1.9%. Well, in terms of the growth, you know, we're living in an era where growth rates across the world are not.
America's doing all right.
Well, America's a slightly different economy to ours, but you know, this is good news. But there's much more to be done, and that's why this government is only just getting started in terms of trying to get growth going in this economy.
Sir Simon Clarke, I put this question to Gareth Davies earlier. I'm going to put it to you as well. Defence spending up, deregulation, benefits bills slashed, Whitehall reformed and reduced the size of the state. This is stuff you spent years talking about wanting to do in government, and it's a Labour government that's finally delivering it.
Well, there's a lot of stuff at any time that can cosplay as being something which it isn't, and I think
well, £6 billion off the welfare budget is nothing to sniff at.
The reality is that today's budget, sadly, does go to show the extent to which the autumn budget failed on its own terms. So Sir Keir Starmer has said that growth is his defining
number one priority,
and growth this year is halved. The figures, as you said, for the rest of the forecast period never get above 2% growth, which is pretty hopeless. And critically, that's before the impact of the employment rights bill that's coming down the track is factored in. So the OBR didn't include that in their forecast today because they don't have enough.
Well, it says it will be net negative.
It will be net
all likelihood
so,
it'll be net
so
negative.
those figures will only get weaker.
Well, look, it's really important on this issue because one of the big things today that I think, and I think Simon may even agree with this because I know that he's a big fan of planning reform, is that the planning reform this government has already done has been estimated to be a massive increase in the growth in our country, which hasn't cost the taxpayer...
Massively generous.
2%.
Well, for a single policy which hasn't cost the taxpayer much money at all, it's not a fiscal stimulus, it's part of changing the structuring of the state, changing how our economy works. That is significant. And that we're just getting started. That's just the first bill. There's more to come that the OBR hasn't taken into account. So, look, I accept this is difficult times. I don't think any Labour politician's coming on saying the world is great, let's all celebrate.
I don't know, Darren Jones seemed pretty chipper.
No, because Darren Jones and Rachel Reeves are serious. They understand that this is really tough times. We live in a really fragile world. National security, economic security are at the forefront of what this government has to do. And this statement today goes some way to reassuring people.
On Simon's point, though, just quickly, Simon, I'll bring you back in a sec, but are you saying not a single policy decision made in the October budget, whether that was increasing borrowing by £30 billion or hitting, increasing taxes by £40 billion, the highest tax burden, not even since the war, ever, are you honestly saying that's had no bearing on the state of the British economy now and the fact that growth this year has been slashed?
Well, since the budget at the end of last year, every single major economy in Western Europe has seen their growth rate slashed. There has been other things going on in the world, which no doubt, Harry, you'll be aware, and the viewers will be aware too. Look, on the issue of national insurance for business, it's really difficult. I accept that.
Well, you also misled the voters before the election.
Well, I don't agree with that for 1 minute, actually. But it's really difficult. I speak to businesses in my constituency and they're going to find it tough. But the problem with Simon and others who say that they wouldn't have done this is, are they then calling for a £22 billion cut to NHS spending? Because
Simon,
your readers, your viewers care about the NHS, waiting lists at record levels.
But that is, I'm afraid, a very unfair framing of the choices that we face. The UK economy is structurally smaller as a result of the changes that you're making than it would have been if we hadn't seen a particular NICS increase, which on the OBR's own figures is going to cost 50,000 jobs. If you follow Bloomberg's analysis, it's 130,000. And, bear in mind, a lot of these tax increases haven't even yet come into effect. They kick in April. So
what would
there's
you do
a lot
on the
of
NHS?
Well, I think we have to control public spending. That is the first thing to say. It is structurally too high. And
not sure how that's going to help the NHS.
Well, it's going to come out, obviously, of the welfare budget, which you yourselves are now trying to trim. The reality is, though, that taking £5 billion out of welfare, which is what the government is doing, and obviously they've had to find extra savings in the last 24 hours to make that work, still doesn't address the fact that there is this huge rise to the thick end of 100 billion a year on working age welfare by 2029. That is where we have to get spending back under control. Now, to give the government their, if you like, the fairest possible hearing I can, spending on welfare has increased since the pandemic. Right? There's 1.2 million more working age people on health and disability benefits than there were in 2020. That is a problem that arose because we had to loosen the controls on welfare during COVID. Getting that genie back in the bottle is not straightforward and easy. But I think just really to make a final point, salami slicing the amount we pay individual claimants, which is what the government is doing today, is very different to structural reform. And I think Labour MPs in particular will find this very hard.
On that, Jake, if you guys, 5.8 billion, I think you found the OBR said that they work it out it's going to be. That's already, the scars are already on your backs for that. Your Labour MP, your colleagues on the Green benches are coming forward and saying this and no more.
Well, I don't know what my colleagues are saying. I can say what I want to say. There's a really important point that Simon raised. The last government let their eye off the ball on this issue, because the statistics about the welfare bill at the end of the last government, after 14 years of Tory government, are startling. 1 in 8 young people not in employment or education.
But do you have the fiscal will and capital to do what is going to be required, and the howling and the screaming and in some cases very fairly, in other cases less so? We've
got to do what it takes to get this country back up on its feet. And when it comes to welfare, I agree with Simon that it's not just about sort of salami slicing or this and that. It's about fundamental change, about getting the welfare system working to get people back into work, because that is the best way out of poverty. Get people into work. Now, that didn't happen, in particular, in the last 5 years of the Tory government, where there was complete chaos when it came to welfare. And this government is starting to get a grip of it. But there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, Jake, on that point, and I'm being really fair by observing that it's messy.
Quite fair.
But
don't be fair.
The point is, we had to
say what you really think.
We had to loosen controls during COVID, right? In the same way that the government now is citing the global instability as a factor behind the headwinds facing the economy. And that is true. We got no such allowance from Rachel Reeves and Bridget Phillipson and Keir Starmer when we were talking about the impact of Ukraine on the economy in 2023. On the welfare issue specifically, universal credit, which Labour denigrated for years, is the best mechanism for making sure that you get to keep more of what you earn as you work either at all or work more hours. That's what we need to return to. There's a specific issue around health and disability benefits. What I'm saying is that Labour is still playing in the shallow end of addressing this. 5 billion of savings when it's rising by something like 35 billion.
Tory manifesto had 12 billion of savings. Well, she's going to have to come back for more, isn't she?
She is.
Well, look, I don't want to be... We're getting on very well, so I don't want to be too partisan about this.
Don't worry.
It's a bit rich for someone who served in the cabinet.
Here we go.
For a large period of time and 14 years of Tory government to now say, well, you've got to do more quickly. I mean, come on. I think they should serve a bit of time.
Did you guys poison the well a little bit, though? On a whole host of things. The whole debate about the NHS in this country has been poisoned by the fact that any time any government of any stripe, be it from Blair or from Tories, went for that, it was suddenly, the argument was, you're trying to privatise it, you're trying to sell it to America. Same with on the welfare stuff. The same, and the point that Simon makes there about, you're suddenly talking about global headwinds and global instability and external factors. Did Labour overcook it a little bit during the pandemic, the immediate aftermath, and generally is, you've made this rod for your own back.
I don't think we had to overcook anything. I think the British people took their verdict on the Conservative Party and they got their worst result in hundreds of years.
Did.
And now there's a period of reflection for the Conservative Party. I mean, on the NHS, I would say that I don't think it's right that Labour are kind of just saying we need to spend more money on the NHS. That is part of the answer, because we need to get waiting lists down. But Wes Streeting is talking about really radical reform in the NHS.
All the extra money given to the NHS in October went on pay rises.
Well, hold on, no, waiting lists have come down for the last 5 months consistently. And I think that pattern will continue under this Labour government. And ultimately, at the next election, people are going to look at, are they feeling better off? Well, wages are going up. Has the NHS improved? The waiting lists are coming down.
We will get to the next manifesto when it comes in. More broadly, though, look, I want to talk about this. We were talking about with Gareth Davis earlier. This idea that we're slightly in a bit of a doom loop, and it's Rachel Reeves is going to have to come back in October, play this merry dance with the OBR once again, where you're essentially allowing a outsourced quango. We don't like quangos anymore. I thought was what Keir Starmer said. You're essentially allowing unelected bureaucrats and officials to keep you in such a tight guardrails that they set economic policy in this country more so than perhaps the Chancellor is. Simon, question to you: was the OBR the stupidest thing the Tory government ever set up, given its, it is literally handing power to unelected officials?
I think there are real problems with how the OBR operates, and I think we're now seeing that this is hampering the current government as much as it hampered us. Now, the value of having an independent assessment of government economics is clear for all to see, if you like. It's someone to mark the homework. But this has morphed into a situation where this wasn't really Rachel Reeves' spring statement this morning. It was the OBR's spring statement.
It is remarkable.
She is scrambling to make really last minute, cuts to welfare to fit within the parameters set by...
Exactly the point I was going to make, Jake. Is it plausible? Is it really how we should be running this country? That them literally burning the midnight oil in the Treasury this week, trying to scramble around for another 500 million in order to fit the OBR's costings and these fiscal rules that she has set herself.
I don't accept this argument that we saw, and Simon was very closely involved, what happens when you ignore the OBR, when you ignore external advice about the fiscal constraints in the country, and you undertake the budget in 2022, which crashed the economy under Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng.
I'm sure Simon will come back on that particular phrasing.
Ultimately, it's democratically elected politicians who make the fiscal rules, who decide how we spend our money, and can make those arguments to the public, and they can ignore the Office of Budget
Responsibility
as well as I do.
That privately, people around Rachel Reeves, at the very top of the Treasury, are spitting tax about the OBR.
Yeah, and how it works. There's a line, right? That's the line. That's the government line we just heard, right? Which is that it's all fine because it's within ultimately our discretion. Try and tell any Labour voter, or indeed the Rachel Reeves of a year ago, that this is what they were voting for, because it wasn't.
I mean, this is really interesting stuff, because Simon heads up a really influential think tank on Kemi Badenoch and the new Conservative Party that they're developing. And if they're saying that we think we should ignore the Office of Budget Responsibility, and they're going to go to the British people and say, trust us with the economy again, good luck to them.
So Simon, it's got a point there.
It's not about abolition, but it is about saying that there are structural issues in the interaction between forecasts and policy choices. And I think this needs to be refined, including, I think, the last-minute nature of the interaction between the forecast being received and government policy settings. So, you cannot tell me that it is sensible to have the Treasury having to scramble to cobble together hundreds of millions of welfare savings 24, 48 hours before a fiscal event. It's not because it's not delivering reform, it's delivering cuts to very, very vulnerable people's income.
It's got a point there,
I'm not actually sure.
50,000
the overnight story in one of the other papers, I'm not sure whether that's accurate, actually, because the Chancellor's statement today didn't suggest that was. But
she has gone further than she was going to go to last week.
I think it's right to come to the country and say that we're sticking to our fiscal rules, which are at the heart of this government's economic strategy, to have stability in the economy, to try and get growth, is a sensible way.
Is it really stability in the economy, though? Because you're going to end up with... We can know how this year is going to play out now. And as the drumbeat towards the October budget, we're going to see what's happened with Donald Trump and tariffs and possible global instability around Iran and Russia, and is there going to be peace, and all of it is going to have a long summer of external factors, whatever you want to blame them. But what we're going to end up having is, again, this same debate in the run-up of, will she have the headroom? Is she going to put up taxes? Is she going to have to cut even further? And the problem is that's not stability, is it? That's instability. You say this is a stable government, but like all you're doing is allowing speculation to run rife.
You've been involved in politics longer than me. I mean,
I know, it makes me want to bang my head against the wall. It makes me,
that speculation was there well before the Office of Budget Responsibility. There's always speculation about what the government is going to do and the strategies to try and get the country improving. I mean, I don't think that's new.
Yeah. We haven't heard, but you won't even tell us where the spending cuts are coming. You won't really tell us where the next round of welfare cuts are coming. You won't really tell us if taxes are going to go up.
You can hold me to account on some of the tax and welfare changes that we've set out in a green paper, and they'll be going through Parliament over the coming months.
Really, but for 4.8 billion or whatever it is off the welfare bill, when it's forecast to hit 70 billion pounds by 2028-29, this is tinkering.
It is, and just to come back on this point about there's the OBR question, which I think is a question, whatever Jake says about how it should be reformed. I think there is a second question, which is the Chancellor's own choices. The most interesting thing today is that the Chancellor has built back in the very same headroom, literally to the pound and penny, that she had in October, and which has obviously been destroyed by global events in the 6 months since.
And the lack of growth.
And the OBR's own document says that headroom is capable, quote unquote, of fading almost to zero. That's directly in the document because of tariffs on their own, just tariffs.
We're sort of measuring the headroom, but it's more than when we came into government back in July last year.
Yeah, but that's not the test. The test is whether the headroom is enough, and the headroom is not enough.
But it is a bit rich for someone who, again, was a Chief Secretary of Treasury in part of the dying days of the Conservative government to sort of criticise us for improving the headroom. But look, there's a lot of work to do, and as I say, no one is saying that this is all
tickety-boo.
Tickety-boo. We're in tough times. Everyone knows.
We're never going to get out of this. We're never going to get out of this quagmire with those growth numbers. That's the problem.
Well, ultimately,
it goes back to our original point.
Ultimately, we're going to have to be double down on the growth agenda and also reform the way the state works. And that is going to be at the heart of this government, and we'll be judged on that over the coming years.
I suspect we could talk about that at Jake Richards, Sir Simon Clarke. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.